during the Cold War. I mean, this loss to the Americans on their own ice. So they didn't know what was going to happen. And then when they got back to Moscow, they could all be sent to the gulag for all they knew. There were Communist Party officials sitting on the plane. I mean, it was the last place in the world you would ever think that you would try to dissent or to do some act of rebellion. So what did Vasilyev do? He came charging out of the cockpit, and he grabbed his coach Tikhonov by the neck, and he started shaking him. Wow. He said, "I will throw you off this plane right now if you don't take back what you said." And ultimately, he was hauled away, and they landed in Moscow. And of course, you would think this story had never been told, and I had to tease it out of some of his teammates. So you would think, okay, what's going to happen? He's going to jail, and the team is going to implode, right? So what happened instead was a few months later, the team was asked to elect a captain, and they voted for Vasilyev. And at that moment, at that precise moment, they came out and they just started crushing everybody. So for the next 4 years, this team was unbelievable. The best hockey team on skates of all time. They beat everyone. They won every championship. They played a group of NHL All-Stars, including Wayne Gretzky and Bobby Orr, the best All-Star team Canada ever had. They beat them 8-3. They just destroyed everybody. So I went back because I needed to figure out how this is possible. And what I found out was that there's something at work here. There's a kind of conflict inside a team that is actually healthy, and there's a kind of conflict that's toxic. And the difference in this case was that Vasilyev came to practice the next day after he tried to choke his coach on the airplane. And what did he do? He said, "Hey, coach," he laced up his skates, he went on the ice, he went back to work. So the difference is there's one kind of conflict that's personal. When he attacked his coach, it wasn't a personal attack. It was something else. There's a kind of conflict called task conflict. This is when the argument is really about what's good for the team or making sure the team is able to compete and play well together. And this is what he was doing. He was trying to hold his team together in what he knew was a very desperate, pivotal moment. And by attacking his coach, it wasn't a personal thing. He was doing it for the good of the group. And everyone seemed to recognize this. Even in the Soviet Union, they figured this out. And the result was that the team was unified around his leadership. And he had the respect to the coaches. There was a lot of conflict. He was able to talk to them and to talk frankly with them about what was good for the team. But right away, at a moment where you think the whole team would have fallen apart, instead they turned into this unstoppable force. So that's really important. A lot of times we look at someone who creates conflict, someone who pushes back, someone who's always got an opinion about how things can be done better, and we think that conflict is bad. We think that these kinds of people are negative forces, but really, we have to look at their motivations for doing it and what their goals are. And we have to stop throwing away or disregarding people who are constantly agitating for things to be a different way. We have to understand that sometimes it's coming from the right place, and sometimes you have to just give in and allow it to happen, and allow these players to tell you what to do. And time and again, that's what I saw. The great coaches and the great captains had a lot of conflict in their relationships and a lot of tough discussions. And in the end, it always made the team better.
Yeah. I think if you look at how that gesture also reflects on the audience, so the players who were looking at that take place, you note in the book that we're sort of genetically programmed to have a positive response to actions that are brave, that are steadfast, that show a fierce commitment to leadership. And that's something that if I were a member of a team and I saw that happening, and I saw, my captain standing up for me, that would be a huge bond of loyalty. And, the other thing, the fact that he came back the next day and he, apologized and moved past it, also showed that there was no emotion. There was no grudge. There was nothing sort of showing a lack of self-control in his action. And that's something else that you note in the book, is that this remarkable level of emotional self-control. And that there was a study that, we tend to glamorize the emotional players and the people who kind of like put on these acts of emotion on the court or on the pitch or on the field. And that's something that's interesting, because there's actually a negative result from, quote, playing angry or from demonstrating over emotion emotion, and I think that also reflects on people watching you as well. Like I think there's a level to which we appreciate it, but then once you go over the top, you start looking down on that person.
There's such an interesting point here that I never knew and never imagined, which was a real revelation to me, which is that you look at aggressive play, and especially in sports, it's true in business too. There are people who just push the boundaries of what's acceptable and
Yeah.
interpersonally. And a lot of times it's very easy to look at them from the lens of normal behavior and to think, okay, this person is not fit for leadership. This person is a loose cannon. This person is not really in control of themselves emotionally. What I saw over and over again with these athletes was that they often did things that were ugly or brutal or aggressive in competition, but there was an important difference. And the best example I can give of this is a team that I never knew anything about that ended up on my list of the greatest teams. It's the greatest Olympic team of all time, male or female. It's the Cuban women's volleyball team from 1990 to 2000. I'd never heard of them. For 10 years, they did not lose a match of consequence. And they beat everyone in the world. And this is a tiny, poor country of 9 million people. I mean, it's amazing what they accomplished. They didn't have the best athletes at all, but there was something about them. They were an incredible force. So here's the example that I think is interesting. In the Atlanta Olympics in 1996, this team was 6 years into their big run, but they were demoralized. They lost something. They lost a couple of important matches in the early rounds. And it looked like their run was going to end right there. And they got to the semifinals, and they were going to play Brazil. And Brazil was really their top competition in the world. And the captain of this team is a woman named Maria Luis. And Maria Luis was one of these characters I talked about. Now, she decided to do something that was very unconventional. She knew she had to find some way to shore up her team and to try to intimidate the Brazilians because she could feel it slipping away. So what she did was she told her teammates in a private meeting away from the coaches, she said, here's what we're going to do in this match with Brazil. We're going to throw the most vicious insults we can think of at the Brazilians across the net. And her teammates looked at her like she was crazy. What do you mean? She said, I'm talking about the worst things one woman can say to another. And they were all kind of like, okay. I mean, there's trash talking in volleyball, but not
Yeah,
like that.
but not a lot. Yeah. But also volleyball, you can hear every word that people are saying. It's
Yes.
not like other sports where you're running all over the place and there's noises and you're not, in a closed space. I mean, you can definitely hear everything that's happening.
Yeah, you're facing each other, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
you can hear
but,
everything.
But there's an invisible shield, because you can't reach, there's no physical contact.